I tried to shut off my emotions. I was able to do that for 30 years. And then eventually it starts leaking into everything I'm doing. I thought I was so smart and so strong, pushing it all down. But once I opened Pandora's box and I started to acknowledge my anger and my fear and my loneliness and my shame and all those other things, it was a process. It took some time. But once I worked through that outside of work on my own time, I worked through my own emotional experiences and release. Then when I showed up, I was more mentally clear. I was more calm. People felt more safe around me. And when people feel safer, then they show up completely.
Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast, a space dedicated to one belief that you have the power within to create everything you seek. So if you are ready to step into a new kind of higher learning, the kind that leads to true personal freedom, hang here with me. I'm your host, Rudi Riekstins, and this is the Empowered Life. Welcome to the Empowered Life Podcast. My name is Rudi Riekstins. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Rudi Lyman. He is a physicist, an entrepreneur, an author, and a leadership coach who has built and exited 8-figure companies, including a Inc. 500 company. But Randy's work today goes deeper than just strategy, performance, and business mechanics. In today's episode, we are going to talk about emotional awareness and how that may be the missing piece in leadership, fulfillment, and lasting success. I know that you are going to be leaning in today's conversation because so many of us are chasing this elusive something, and we think that the more successful we become, we're finally going to feel like we're enough, that we're whole, that we're complete, and yet that void seems to speak even louder. Today's guest has lived it, experienced it, and is now supporting you in coming through to the other side. Randy, thank you so much for joining me on the Empowered Life Podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Great to be here, Rudi, because this is going to be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, I want to start right up front with the foundation that we set. You have exited a number of companies, majority of them 8-figure organizations. You've achieved success. You live a very big life. And now you're turning around and supporting other people in being able to come through the other side. I was on a call with a client yesterday, $100 million net worth, and is just so alone, so unhappy, relationships broken, doesn't understand how they got to the area of where they've gotten to in life. And I see this so often. And I love that you have achieved this level of success that you can lean against someone and say, me too, know how, and I know what I've done. And so my question really is, we all know that that really is the thing, but I want to start with what from your life experience is the cause. And then how do we really overcome that? Because we are all chasing this elusive success. And how can we be successful where we're at today? So what, in your words, is the cause? And how did you really navigate yourself from that?
When we're younger, especially as men, we take a more masculine approach. When we grow up through junior high and high school, we have to be tough. We have to establish ourselves in a man's world. That's just part of growing up as a man. And then we get out in the workplace and we try and control things, masculine energy again, and we try and push our way through life. And that's helpful to a point. But at some point in time, when it comes to leading other people, hopefully we realize, and it took me a long time to realize this, that it's not about motivating. Motivation a lot of times comes back to fear. For me, I found success when I was able to connect with people and inspire them to be the best they could be. And that's not the way I grew up. That's not the way I was trained, but because I was able to incorporate so much about what I was learning in my own personal life about spiritual growth and personal growth and working through my issues of anger and loneliness and all that, I was able to connect with the people I worked with at a completely different level. So who I am today as a leader is the opposite of who I was 40 years ago.
I love to say on the podcast that we are becoming the person we're meant to be. And what's happening right now essentially is the curriculum. And I love that you were a certain way, achieved a semblance of success in life and in business, that then pressed upon those buttons that really made you dive in and do a little bit of the deeper work. And today's conversation is going to go deeper. It's going to go spiritual. It's going to go into the law of attraction. It's going to go into emotion resilience and how we should stop avoiding emotions. Like, we're going to touch it all today. But for so many people, they want to be successful. And what they just heard you say was, I created tremendous success by not being all these things. And then I realized, well, that isn't what I really wanted. And so now my life is more whole. And they're thinking, but I want the success.
Okay, but hang on. So I didn't maybe express myself as clearly in that time as I could have. So I found success when I was completely left brain. But once I incorporated more of the right brain relationship aspects in my leadership, then I built my companies to 30 times what they were when I pushed. So once I stopped pushing and I started inspiring, then we found the real success. Then we achieved a lot of growth. When I say we, I mean my teams. I'm just a leader. I can't do it without the people who I lead. And so, in order to accomplish what we did as a team and teams that I worked with, I had to change my approach to leadership. And once I did that, that's when I really found the true success and was able to find fulfillment along the way. In addition to just business success and profits and growth, I felt better about what I was doing and my life was more fulfilled.
Wanted to touch on because I am aware that you 30x'd your businesses when you actually started to shift how you were approaching inside of your company. And people think that we're in this hustle culture of produce more, work harder, expect more, be demanding. And it's more about attracting and aligning than it is about doing and forcing. For the people that are wanting to achieve success and they've been taught and trained and conditioned that we have to hustle and grind and work really hard, and they haven't achieved that success yet, to get them to change the hustle and grind mentality to become somebody who is more going to align with greater levels of success, but they've never been told that that's the way. How do you get them to believe that that's actually the easier, faster, more joyful route?
I think it's a balance of the two. I think the little bit of grind and the hustle and the personal desire is really necessary. So yeah, we do have to have a level of hustle and grind. But if we don't balance that with spending time to take care of ourselves, make sure that we are mentally and emotionally clear. And for me, mental clarity doesn't come until I have emotional clarity. And people, emotions, what are you talking about emotions? I just shut that shit off and I just move forward and everything's okay. Well, when I tried to shut off my emotions, I was able to do that for 30 years. And then eventually it starts leaking into everything I'm doing. If I'm worried because I have emotions around my fear of failure, around my anger, which is covering up loneliness and betrayal and all those human emotions that we all have. I thought I was so smart and so strong pushing it all down. But once I opened Pandora's box and I started to acknowledge my anger and my fear and my loneliness and my shame and all those other things, it was a process. It took some time. But once I worked through that outside of work on my own time, I worked through my own emotional experiences and release. Then when I showed up, I was more mentally clear. I was more calm. People felt more safe around me. And when people feel safer, then they show up completely. And yes, I did accomplish a lot, as you said, through the pushing. And I thought I was really being smart. I thought I was being clever by turning off my emotions. But once I said, screw this, I'm going to try it. I'm going to take a risk. And so I had multiple companies. I had multiple departments within my companies. And I took a group of 7 people and I started doing group planning and group problem solving and getting direct feedback from them. And the first 2 meetings we had, because we go and do dinner meetings offsite, they just thought I was full of crap and I wasn't going to listen to them. When I finally started enacting some of the things they suggested and they built some trust in me, then they opened up and they shared more. So they were a little bit skeptical, like, does Randy really mean it? I was skeptical because if I thought I didn't have all the answers and I asked for help and I was somewhat vulnerable, that they would lose respect for me. And the opposite happened. When I listened to them, then their respect for me went up. They started to open up. They shared great ideas and we worked together to really start building more successful businesses, finding more profit and being able to grow.
You know, so many leaders, they have this belief that we need to be stoic and that there's no place for emotion inside of a business. And so often I hear the words, I'm not emotional, I'm just driven. And I would love for you to speak to them right now about the value and the importance of understanding that emotions are actually key drivers and that when you learn to pay attention to them, you actually have creative control of your life. whereas most people are reacting and responding to their lives. But speaking very specifically now to somebody that is a business leader, a lot of the people inside of my community run large organizations or they have large teams. And I would love for you to chip away at that old paradigm of we need to be a certain way and instead create the space for vulnerability. You beautifully shared a moment ago how your team started to react and respond when you introduced vulnerability. But how do we get that person over the edge? Because I'm always thinking through that lens. We can hear something and understand it. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. But that doesn't mean we're going to action it. It doesn't mean we're going to do it. And I love to push and nudge and poke and prod and beat a certain question from many angles so that somebody on this call today creates that change. I selfishly would love that at the end of this episode, somebody walks into a business meeting and says, hey, I need you 7 guys to come with me and we're going to sit in that conference room and we're going to have a real conversation because I have no idea what the F I'm doing and I'm just going to trust that you do and we're going to figure this out and have a real moment. But for so many people, they believe they need to be stoic. And so I would love for you to talk about what is the value in being able to interpret your emotions and what do you do with them and why would you do it?
Well, that's one reason I wrote the book, The Third Element, is I share a lot of my story in there about how one step at a time, I tried different things in my life. Now, it's not written with a business intent, but everything I write in there does absolutely apply to a business leader's life. So I had to look at what emotions were I avoiding. And we believe that if we just turn off our negative emotions, our worry, our frustration, our anger, whatever that might be, that we can just turn off those negative emotions. But the challenge is we turn off the positive emotions as well. Emotions, the switch, the Pandoras box, so to speak, has one lid. You open it up and it's all there. And one reason we don't look at it is because it's scary. So I guess the first step is understanding that there's a different way to show up. And then setting our intention, I want to learn a different way to show up. And I am open to the idea of looking at my own emotional wounding in my own time outside of work. Ideally, we find a partner, whether it's a brother, our father, even a son, it can be with your domestic spouse as well, whether it's our husband or wife, depending on the combination. That can work. The challenge for men is if we show up in our relationship with the woman in our life and we ask for help, we have to be careful that we do it from a place of confidence or it erodes our relationship. So a lot of men believe that when we show up at work and we ask for help, that it will erode people's confidence in us. The work environment is different than the home environment. So if somewhere in your family or your best friend or find a coach who you can be vulnerable with and practice outside of work and find a way to share your deepest fears. If you're not comfortable sharing it with somebody, start a journal, start writing. A journal isn't about something we're going to share with somebody else. A journal is about self-discovery. A journal is a way our brain can look at the problems in our life, look at possible solutions, and then go one level deeper, which is what am I feeling? Am I feeling fear? Am I fear of failure? Am I feeling that if I open that Pandora's box of emotions, my anger is going to overwhelm me? That was my challenge. My anger wasn't the problem. It was a challenge and I had to work through it. But under my anger was betrayal and loneliness. So again, start with the intention. I'm going to learn how to do this. Take small steps, find a partner, whether it's a coach, whether it's somebody in your family, whether it's somebody at work who you really trust and they trust you, and practice. Then once we've practiced with somebody or a group of people, a support group, whoever it might be, know that it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take weeks and months and years to really get through the evolution. It's going to be an investment in time. And so once we've set our intention and we start down that road, we will be guided. We're always guided to the right people who can help us. Law of attraction works that way. Quantum physics is all about possibility. And when we observe, when we set our intention, then the world is laid out for us one moment at a time and we're given what we need. And so I set my intention and I want to meet with somebody who can help me. What happens? Somebody shows up in my life, and it happens for everybody, that can coach them, who's been down that road, who can give them advice. Well, I don't want to share my secrets with somebody, especially somebody I hardly know. I'm going to jump ahead here. People only judge us as much as we judge ourselves. So growing up in the 1960s and 70s, which I did, we were motivated through fear and shame. And I didn't realize how much of that fear and shame that was used to motivate me, I still held on to, and I judged myself based on other people's opinion of me. And that is a whole box of emotions itself to work through. So once we find clarity about how do I see myself, what are my thoughts about myself, most importantly, what are my feelings internally, subconscious feelings about myself that I can work through, then I'm not worried if people judge me. And that gives me the freedom to experiment more with how I interact with others. It gives me the freedom to experiment how deep I dig into my own emotional wounding. And I may be getting a little off track here, but again, I'm going to just recap. Set the intention through books like mine. Again, I'm pitching the book because I didn't write this to make money. I wrote this to be helpful. I don't do very well in retirement, and I want people to have the success I've achieved. So find a way to understand that emotions are the path to success, not making decisions based on emotions, not reacting emotionally, not manipulating using emotions. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an understanding of the basic human component, our human element of our emotions. So understanding, awareness, look for somebody to help, start down that road, even if you don't know what the road looks like yet. And once we set the intention, the path will be shown to us. And it is a big investment. And for me, that was another worry I had. Well, I don't have the time to do this. Turns out when I invested in the time for my own emotional growth, I became more effective. It was infectious as to how I interacted with people, and it was effective as to how we all operated as a group. And I got my time back through my investment in other people. The group became more effective and I got my time back. So it's a lot to pack into 5 minutes. What questions do you see from what I've shared so far?
So I want to recap everything that we've covered in today's episode for the benefit of the audience, for someone who is listening to this right now, so that you can continue to journey deeper with us in today's conversation. So Randy was already profoundly successful, number of companies, 8-figure companies. And he then decides he wants to do the hard work. He wants to pay attention to his feelings. And he wants to ask the questions about how does he feel about himself. He's looking at the external world and or environment as a reflection back of how he sees himself. And all of this is hard. It's painful. And 98% of people on the planet are avoiding this level of accountability, this level of looking at self. The majority of people are drinking alcohol so they don't feel. They are taking drugs or suppressants or antidepressants. They are consumed with greed, lust, etc. And most of this is because they want to feel whole. They want to feel healed. They want to feel enough. They want to feel worthy. They don't want to feel betrayed. They tired of being the victim. And I'm dangling a carrot because I think this is so necessary for everybody to come through. That Randy's success literally grew 30 times when he started to do the inner work, because the inner work changed how he saw himself. When it changed how he saw himself, it changed how he interacted with his team. He, as the leader, gave his team permission to see themselves. It created vulnerability. The number one driver in human behavior is through connection. And the only way we can create connection is a vulnerability. The vulnerability is the electricity that turns on the lights. And so giving people permission, they showed up and their lives expanded, their emotional capacity expanded, and the company thus expanded. And so as we dive deeper into today's conversation, I want you to have that in the forefront of your mind. What is the payoff for asking yourself, how do you feel about yourself? Is more money, more joy, more fulfillment, more freedom. You just have to be watching on YouTube to see the smile on Randy's face right now. And this is available to you if you do the inner work. Randy, you've touched on so many things. My question to you is, for the person that's listening to this now thinking, that sounds great, but I don't even know how to start asking the deeper questions about myself, and what is that going to feel like? I am reminded of a gentleman I had a conversation with 5 years ago, and I think about him so often because I'm on a call with him and the man is just completely broken down. Very successful, but he had a really difficult childhood with his brothers. And the 3 brothers are independently wealthy. And he said to me, I can't do this work. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I don't want to feel any of these things. I don't want to know about my childhood. I don't want to go to my past. I don't want to fix anything. And he literally just shut down. And that was the last time I spoke to him because he didn't want to go to any of his past because he didn't want to feel. And unfortunately, because I'm still following him, his life hasn't changed a whole lot. And my hope is that he's listening. What do you say to him or someone like him who is doing everything in their power to avoid feeling?
The people who are the smartest and the strongest willed have the biggest challenge in working through emotional growth because we have learned all the buttons to push and the levers to pull to shut off our emotions and keep pushing forward. And we really need a breakdown. And I've had several breakdowns, momentary breakdowns. It's not like I was broken down for hours or days, but when the pain comes through, the most powerful thing I can do as a successful 64-year-old man, as a masculine, successful 64-year-old man, the most powerful thing I can do is feel my feelings and cry the tears and let the pain go. So emotions are bigger than time and space. So if I felt something when I'm 5, 6, 7 years old, 17 years old, whatever that was, and I didn't feel it completely because it was too painful, and I shut off the emotions coming through at that moment in time, they wait for me. And there's no clock ticking in the emotional dimension. And if I don't attend to that emotion, become aware of it, feel it, experience it, and release it through whatever means I can, breath work, tapping, working out, screaming at a tree, whatever it might be. If I don't let that energy go, it's going to interact on a quantum level with the law of attraction to bring chaos into my life until I feel it. So I had to find times and places to feel the pain. I had a partner at the time, my romantic partner, Maria, who I talk about in the book. I was with her for 3 years. She held the space for me and she didn't judge me when I either got angry or broke down in tears and let it come through. And now somebody's asking, well, how's that help? Because emotions are like gasoline. If I put gasoline in a metal can, they'll store for 10 or 20 years and that energy is still there. But when I pour it out and burn it, it burns. It makes some heat, some passion, some feelings, some emotion in the moment, and then it's gone. Once gasoline burned, it's gone forever, and then it can no longer interact with the law of attraction to bring chaos into my life. And I know we jumped into the law of attraction, but everything that we experience in our life is in harmonic resonance with our thoughts, in resonance with our actions, or in resonance with our emotions. That's it. There's only 3 categories or 3 elements in our life. And if we just look at our thoughts and our actions and not our emotions, whatever negative emotions need to be felt are going to push their way through to the surface. And we're not going to be able to deny them forever, no matter how smart we are, no matter how strong we are. So we need to find a place. And what I did is I asked the universe, law of attraction, God's source, whatever you want to call it. I said, okay, find a time and place where it's safe and surprise me. And let's get through some of this stuff. Let's get some of these old emotions in the right time and place where I'm not at work. I'm not worried about what people think. And I live my life that way. When I want something, I set my mind to it. If you go back 100 years, Think and Grow Rich, I think people have been talking about the secret and how our thoughts and all that affect our reality. And they do. The deeper component is the emotional component, the emotional element. So set the intention, surrender, and know that the universe will only bring you those challenges and those old emotions to pour through in a time and space when you're safe. And yeah, that's unknown. That's not a clear definition, but our mind drives our reality and our intentions set the path that we're on. So be bold, be willing to feel the pain, be brave, and know that it's going to hurt like hell, but in the end, it's worth it.
I love so much that you are talking about law of attraction. You're talking about quantum physics. You're talking about how the emotion drives the thoughts and the emotion drive the human behavior, and how you're thinking and feeling in this moment is essentially dictating what it is that you're going to experience in your future. And that really, in and of itself, is the law of attraction. And I want to take it a step further for the benefit of the audience is that we have creative control. God gave us free will. So whether you call it the universe, whether you call it God, whether you call it the law of attraction, source, we have free will, and the free will is to think and feel how we want to feel about any particular situation. And however you think and feel, it's going to be reflected back to you in your life experience. And how you're thinking and feeling now is creating what you're going to experience next. And if you want to change that, change how you think, change how you feel. And the fastest, easiest, most effective way to change your life is to change your emotional state about your life. Find value and meaning in a moment, and you change your perspective of how you're looking at that particular scene or situation. I know you dive into this in your book, and I want to talk about the third element a little more because I think it's such a great bridge. Because there are men that are listening to this who are successful, who think that law of attraction's woo. They are business leaders and entrepreneurs who are in the hustle and grind culture, and they just heard someone say they 30x their company by not hustling and changing the way they showed up in meetings. And there's just that curiosity that is starting to peak, no doubt, in their minds. And so I would love to know from you, what is the third element? And why do you believe that it is the missing piece in leadership, manifestation, and in fulfillment?
The third element, or the third category in the human experience, in no particular order, but the one we avoid, is our emotions. So emotions are real. Emotions are bigger than time and space. They have an energy all of their own. So when we experience something in the world, our mind, our thinking mind, makes up a story about it. If it's good, we have positive feelings, physical feelings in our body, dopamine, whatever that might be. And that's a physical sensation that is our experience of the emotion around it. That's instinctual in us. That's from 100,000 years ago, a million years ago in our evolution. What's going to guide us? Our emotions guided us. Still today, our mind makes up a story. Our body responds with an emotion. And that energy, that emotional energy, if we don't feel it completely, gets stored within us. So the emotions that we feel are valid to us. They have a real energy, just like in physics, first law of thermodynamics. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, but through, for example, dopamine, we get a happy feeling. Or through other hormones, we get a feeling in our body. That's energy, and that's stored. Now, again, the first law of thermodynamics says we can't just have that energy disappear. We have to transform it, which means we have to go back and experience through our mind guides us through a physical experience, tapping, EFT, working out, whatever it might be. We have to be aware of our body. Breath work is really powerful. We have to be aware of our body in the present moment, not through our thinking, through our feeling. Then we have the opportunity to let that old emotional energy come through us as a physical sensation in our body, and then it's thermalized. In thermodynamics, once something is turned to heat, then that energy is no longer contained, it's released. So we have to be bold enough to feel that old pain, and we have to have techniques that take us there. Now, again, breath work, tapping, journaling, those things can help. I talk about those in the book. And if anybody can find somebody who has had success with emotional release, they're probably going to tell you everybody experiences it differently. But if you can find somebody who's gone through similar growth of getting in touch with old emotions and releasing them, guarantee you they're going to tell you, yeah, when I stuck with it and I got to the deepest core of what I needed to feel, my life improved. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not, but we have to be brave. We have to be willing to feel the pain. And then we have to find either a method or somebody to help us with a method to get in touch with our physical body in the present moment. Now, Eckhart Tolle talks about the present moment, but he doesn't go into that third element. That's one reason I wrote the book is our thoughts and our actions together are not enough. The real key is to be able to use our thoughts and use our actions to get in touch with the old emotional wounding and release that stored up gasoline that we're keeping in that metal can and hoping will go away. Now, in the physical world, in a 3D world, the metal can will separate that gasoline from the physical world, and there's no interaction. At a quantum level, there's no separation. At a quantum level, which is creating our life moment to moment, even if we try and turn off our emotions, they are still interacting with the law of attraction and attracting challenges into our life as a gift of the reminder of the old emotional wounding. So when I said, okay, I made the connection, and I talk about this again in the book, I'm not pushing to sell books. I'm pushing to help people find the path to fulfillment and more success. When I made the connection between my old emotional wounding and the problems I was drawing into my life at work, my challenges at work were reminding me, hey, Randy, you need to look at some personal opportunities for growth here. and I made that connection, it changed how I went about solving my problems at work. Yes, I still think. Yes, I still plan. Yes, I'm still logical. Yes, I grind and I take the actions I need to take. But when I remove that barrier of the old emotional wounding that I'm trying to hold down and I allow it to come through, and the law of attraction, the universe, God source, whatever we look at that's bigger than us, was no longer obligated to bring me painful experiences to remind me of that. So then what happened is I found more clarity. When I found clarity, emotional clarity, then I had mental clarity and my thoughts were more clear. I could communicate more clearly. My body was healthier and I could work longer. If somebody wants to still grind, get the emotional pain out of the way and you can grind more if you choose to grind. But if you choose to find the balance between the grind, between the overthinking and the emotional growth, it all becomes easier. And as a leader, we become more effective. And when we become more effective as a leader, our teams become more effective. And that's really what business success is all about, is finding ways for our teams to be more effective and more successful.
You have essentially spoken a lot today about what was your emotional pattern and how did it control your life and what happened when you took ownership of that and created a change. And I think it's a beautiful reminder to everybody that's listening that we can create that level of change if we do the work. My follow up to you to that is what have you seen is the most common emotional pattern that you believe that most successful leaders carry that they don't even realize that that pattern is costing them peace, intimacy, trust, love, fulfillment, etc.
So for me, it was anger and blame and frustration because people weren't hearing me. I felt alone. I felt that nobody understood me. And I learned eventually the reason people couldn't understand me is most people are not motivated the same way a lot of leaders are. A lot of leaders are overachievers. For me, I wanted to prove to my family that I was competent and I was worthy. And that drove me to success. But at the same time, it drove me to interact with people thinking they were the same as me, and they weren't. People don't have the same internal drive. They don't have the same internal wounding that I had. And when I realized they just want to be successful at work so they can take care of their family, they want to be acknowledged for who they are. They want to feel like they're contributing to the cause and they want to feel like they belong to the group. Those three things. Again, acknowledgement, feel like they're contributing and they belong. When I realized those are more important, then I interacted with people differently. And I realized that we all want the same thing, but we all react to the world in a different way. And when I realized what levers to pull in the way of personal interactions. Now, I don't have to go out and have beers with the guys or the gals after work. That's not about that. It's about, did I just take 5 minutes or even just 3 minutes to ask somebody, how was your weekend? And then shut up and listen. And then I learned to take notes. And when I walk around the corner, I'd write it down on a pad because 30 years ago, we didn't have phones in our pocket. So for example, Steve in our kit assembly area, his daughter was in soccer and she had a soccer game. So what did I do? 3 days later, 3 weeks later, I'd go back and I'd ask him, how's your daughter doing in soccer? I don't have to get deeply personal, but because I remembered a detail about him, I cheated. I wrote it down. Who cares? He doesn't care. I walked back and said, how's your daughter doing in soccer? Oh my God, he lit up. Now the CEO paid attention to him. Then when somebody else says, oh, Randy never cares, then what happens? He said, yeah, he does care. He did listen. And he shows up to work differently and he starts helping me subconsciously set the environment of our leader really cares about us. Now, I did have to genuinely care. I did have to look for things that were real. But those small behavior changes of listening, paying attention, and circling back to people and showing some interest in them, you'd say, how does that change my profits? Because it changes the way people see us. It changes also the way people see themselves. If I see something special in the people who I lead, they start to realize they're capable of more than they thought.
I love that you gave a tangible example of how someone in business, and we don't have to be a leader of a business, this is for anyone that is interacting with other people to create a deeper, meaningful connection. You could do this with your spouse, you could do this with your kids. And yes, as Randy said, we want to challenge you to do this inside of your business. Pay attention to what people are saying, to what their interests are, and then follow back up with them and have an actual interest in who they are and what they're doing and outside of just their function, because it is going to allow somebody to be seen, valued, heard, and or appreciated. And so that was a tangible tactical tool that you could apply into your life to support somebody else. Essentially, you're showing somebody that you care and creating a safe space. But Randy has also alluded to twice now about tapping and EFT. He's mentioned journaling and a number of these personal self guided processes. And I wanted to save this towards the end of the episode today because this is where we get into the nuts and bolts and the work. I'm not asking you to pitch everyone on here are the different things that we need to do because they can get it inside of your book. And I want to just like put a caveat here. My dear friend Kelly Siegel, who you were on his show recently, he reads about 60 books a year. And when I said to him, when I was going to be recording with you today, literally few minutes before the phone call, he said to me, man, Randy's book is one of the best books I've read. And that's coming from somebody who is an avid reader of self-development. And he was like, wow, that book just hit him differently. It showed him a different version of himself he hadn't seen. And so my challenge to you as the audience is whether you read one book a year or you read 50 to 60 books a year, there's something in this book for you. But what I think is most powerful is that you're giving a voice to what does it look like to do some of these micro steps towards taking back and reclaiming our own inner authority. And the third element really is about speaking into the emotional state. And when we can control that emotional state, we have awareness to the emotional state, we can create the change. And so I would like you to speak into one exercise, just one. That's somebody that isn't into woo, doesn't understand law of attraction, doesn't know what the hell we're doing when we're tapping our chins and foreheads and speaking into the ethers. What is one simple step that you could give somebody that would carry the greatest level of growth and change for them that might open the door for them to looking at doing more exercises like that?
One of the ones that's still most effective for me, and it's safe and easy for left brain people, is pad of paper, 3 columns. First column, what is the problem? What is my challenge? What do I need to change in the outside world, or what do I need to change in my life? Second column, what is the logical solution? And that might solve the problem. But even if it does, I still want to know, third column, what's the feeling or emotion that comes up when I'm thinking about this challenge in my life? What at a deeper level am I feeling that I may be aware of or may not be aware of? And how can I address that? So we're still going to be logical. We're still going to take action. But when we can become more aware of that underlying feeling, then we can look at the solutions from a deeper perspective. And so again, the pen and paper for me is the fastest, the safest, the most universal. And when somebody's done with it, if they don't like what they've written or don't want to share it, they can throw it away, they can burn it. And it's fast, it's easy. One other thing I'm going to share is gratitude. If you're just stuck and can't get to emotion, start a list of the things you're grateful for. Family, having a roof over your head, you still got a car to drive, you have whatever it is, even if it's small. And when we start to write about it and think about it, then we start to feel gratitude. And that gratitude takes us to a place where we can get in touch with the feelings that are waiting to come through.
Every single thing that we've heard today is brilliant and yet simple. And it's just going to require a little bit of action. And it's going to challenge you to do something you've never done before. And so my challenge to you, the audience, because you're investing in your time to listen to something, to learn something new, to have a different perspective, to hear somebody else's story. But it is just that. It's all somebody else's story until you do something with it. And so my challenge for you today is take something that you've learned today, draw your 3 lines down the center of your page, ask the empowering questions, gain a different level of perspective, do some box breathing, learn a little bit about EFT or tapping, do something that is going to give you a new tool or skill set that is going to support you to be different because you have a dream or a goal or desire to live or be or do something different, but it is going to require you to become somebody very, very different. For most of us, we pre-programmed, we preconditioned. We are the repetition of the emotion of who we were yesterday and not who we want to be tomorrow. And so I am going to challenge you to grab a copy of The Third Element. We're going to link his book into the show notes. I'm also going to challenge you to learn a little bit more about Randy, his life, what he does, and how he could potentially impact you, speak to your company, or work with your executive team, or maybe you could bring him in to work with you. I do think that the world has got beautiful, bold, powerful leaders that are out there that are still hustling and grinding, and they are feeling the call to live a different way. And I'm going to remind you that it is not about you being happier and more joyful, but it is about you being the example to all the people inside of your life and in your business that there is another way. And that when you live that way, you're demonstrating by example what does it look like. Randy, you're doing that so beautifully for people. I love that you've been profoundly successful. You found a new way. You gave your people permission to live a new way. You're talking about law of attraction. You're 64 years old. You're a grown man. And yet we're talking about woo. And this is my world. I love so much talking about the law of attraction and how we can have it be. And we are creative beings. And I just think that this is really opening the door for so many people. I am going to ask you one closing question, knowing obviously that your information is going to be added into our show notes. I'm going to encourage people to follow you and to learn about how they can work with you. But I would love to know, what is one last message that if this was the only message that you could leave for this audience and it was the only thing they heard, what would you most want them to know?
Personal growth is messy and we don't have to do it perfectly. We're going to make mistakes along the way. There's no reason to judge ourselves. There's no reason to expect perfection. And what's most important is not being perfect, but being authentic, being honest with ourselves.
Beautiful. I love that it gets to be messy, because for so many of us, we are scared to start because we don't want to look like we don't know what we're doing. And sometimes it's just doing that qualifies us. Randy, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you so much. And to our audience, I love you more than life itself with every fiber of my body and my being. I want you to go out and live the most incredible, benevolent life that you possibly can so that you can show everybody what does it look like, just like Randy's doing. Until next time, we'll catch you in the next episode of the Empowered Life Podcast. Goodbye, everybody. If this episode gave you clarity, peace, or a perspective shift, hold on to that. And here is how you lock it in. Subscribe so that you keep building momentum week after week. And if you're the kind of person that believes a good message should travel, please leave a review. Reviews aren't just ratings. There are signals that help this reach the people who are ready for it. And then share this episode with somebody you love, someone you lead, or somebody that you were rooting for. Links are in the show notes so that you can connect with me online and on Instagram. Now go out there and take one beautiful, bold, and aligned step and make it count. I'm going to catch you on the next episode of the Empowered Life Podcast.